April 9, 1917. The muddy fields below Vimy Ridge in northern France. At 5:30 in the morning, Canadian soldiers prepare to assault one of the most heavily fortified German positions on the Western Front. But the weapon that will break the German line is not artillery. It is not machine guns. Buried in the mud along a 4-mile front are 2,340 steel pipes, each one half buried at a 45-degree angle, each one loaded with a 60-pound drum filled with liquid phosgene gas. In a single moment, an electrical signal travels through miles of wire. A dull red flash flickers along the entire front as far as the eye can see. A slight ground tremor. A muffled roar. 20 seconds later, 2,340 drums crash into German trenches and detonate simultaneously. 50 tons of poison gas vaporize into a cloud so thick that the inventor, watching from an aircraft overhead, can see it drifting over villages miles behind the lines. The Germans never hear it coming. There is no warning, no artillery whistle, no time to reach for gas masks. In the trenches below, men die gasping. This is the story of the Livens Projector, a weapon so crude it was little more than a pipe stuck in the ground. So cheap, it cost roughly 16 shillings to kill a man. So terrifying that captured German soldiers called it the most demoralizing weapon the Allies possessed, making life utterly unbearable. And it was invented by a 27-year-old British engineer driven by personal grief and a burning desire for revenge. To understand why the British needed this weapon, you have to understand the problem they faced in 1915. On April 22, 1915, German forces unleashed chlorine gas at the Second Battle of Ypres. A greenish-yellow cloud rolled across no man's land. Soldiers who had never seen chemical warfare breathed deeply, then collapsed as the chlorine destroyed their lungs from the inside. Thousands died. The age of chemical warfare had begun. Britain responded by forming the special gas companies of the Royal Engineers. But they faced a fundamental problem. Releasing gas from cylinders required favorable wind conditions. If the wind shifted, their own gas blew back into their trenches. The wind could turn a weapon into a hazard. Artillery shells could deliver gas regardless of wind, but shells carried tiny payloads. The concentration was never high enough to overwhelm German respirators. The British needed something that could deliver tons of gas at once, without warning, and regardless of wind conditions. What they got was William Howard Livens. Livens was born in 1889 in Lincoln, England. His father was chief engineer at Ruston and Hornsby, a major industrial firm. William studied civil engineering at Cambridge. On August 4, 1914, the day Britain declared war on Germany, Livens applied for a commission in the Royal Engineers. Then came the spring of 1915. On April 22nd, the Germans used chlorine gas at Ypres, killing thousands. 2 weeks later, on May 7th, a German submarine torpedoed the passenger liner RMS Lusitania. 1,198 civilians died. Livens believed his fiancée was aboard that ship. For 3 agonizing days, he did not know whether she had survived. She had. But in those 3 days, something changed in William Livens. According to his commanding officer, Charles Foulkes, Livens developed what Foulkes diplomatically called a strong personal feeling connected to the Lusitania. Later historians were more direct. Livens reportedly vowed to kill an equal number of Germans. Without official authorization, Livens began conducting experiments. He fitted out makeshift laboratories in his barracks bedroom and an officer's garage. He used vacant land near a ford on the Thames estuary as a firing range. He was looking for new ways to kill. By late 1915, Livens had transferred to the Special Gas Companies and was given command of Z Company, responsible for developing flame and chemical weapons. Sir Harold Hartley later wrote that Livens combined great energy and enterprise with a flair for seeing simple solutions and inventive genius. The Livens Projector was not designed in a laboratory. It was born in the mud of the Somme in 1916. During an attack, Z Company encountered Germans entrenched in positions immune to grenades. Livens improvised 2 giant Molotov cocktails from 5-gallon oil drums. His comrade Harry Strange watched the effect and asked the question that changed everything. Would it not be better to throw containers of flame rather than rely on complex flamethrowers? Livens built a simple mortar from cut-down oil drums that could throw containers of burning oil. Early tests showed promise. More attacks followed. Each time, Livens refined the design. Then came the transformation that would make the Livens Projector the most feared weapon on the Western Front. Instead of oil, Livens filled the drums with phosgene gas. After observing secret gas tests from an aircraft, Livens made his infamous calculation. If the projectors were used on a large scale, the cost of killing Germans could be reduced to 16 shillings each. In today's money, roughly £60 per death. If you're finding this interesting, consider subscribing. It costs nothing, takes a second, and helps the channel continue these deep dives into military history. The final design was almost insultingly simple. A steel tube, half buried in the ground at a fixed 45-degree angle. A 60-pound drum filled with 30 pounds of liquid phosgene. An electrical firing system that could connect hundreds or thousands of tubes together. One signal, thousands of drums. 50 tons of poison gas arriving simultaneously. Each projector fired only once. At roughly the cost of a few artillery shells, this was considered acceptable. The British simply buried more pipes for the next attack. Vimy Ridge was just the beginning. At the Battle of Messines in June 1917, over 6,000 projectors fired in coordination with massive mine detonations beneath German lines. At Cambrai in November 1917, 4,200 drums discharged on the eve of battle. On March 31, 1918, 3,728 projectors fired at Linz in the largest British gas attack of the entire war. By war's end, the Special Brigade had delivered approximately 197,000 projector drums containing roughly 5,700 tons of poison gas. The impact on German forces was devastating. A captured German military document dated December 27, 1917, describes what soldiers experienced. The discharge, in sight and sound, resembled a violent explosion. There were volcanic sheets of flame and a thick noise of impact that could continue for up to 25 seconds after the flash of discharge. The German 111th Division provided even more revealing testimony. They reported that, by this new procedure, the enemy combined the advantages of a gas cloud with those of a gas shell, achieving the density of the former with the surprise effect of the latter. This statement captures exactly why the weapon was so feared. It solved a problem the Germans believed was unsolvable. Captured prisoners were blunter. They called the Livens Projector the most demoralizing weapon the Allies possessed, making life utterly unbearable. The terror came from specific qualities. First, there was almost no warning. The only signal was a distant flash, followed by 20 seconds before impact. Not enough time to don a respirator. Second, the gas concentration was so massive it could overwhelm any protective equipment. Third, the simultaneous discharge of thousands of projectors created an apocalyptic spectacle stretching to the horizon. Fourth, the British alternated real phosgene with harmless foul-smelling substances, so German soldiers never knew whether they faced death or a bluff. Every gas alarm became terrifying. Every strange smell became potentially lethal. The Germans responded the only way they could. They copied the weapon. Its first use came at the Battle of Caporetto on October 24, 1917. 894 German projectors fired into a ravine behind Italian lines. Of the 600 to 800 Italian soldiers garrisoned there, virtually all were found dead. They never had time to put on gas masks. Italy lost 14,000 square kilometers of territory in the following weeks. It was the most successful gas attack ever staged, using a British weapon turned against the Allies' own partners. The Livens Projector did not disappear after 1918. During the invasion scare of 1940, Britain produced over 25,000 Livens projectors for home defense. None were used offensively, but they stood ready if Germany attempted a channel crossing. Livens himself returned to service in the Second World War, working on petroleum warfare weapons. He died in 1964, having outlived the war that drove him to invention by nearly half a century. The Livens projector has been described by military historians as a technological precursor to the multiple rocket launcher. The concept of massing cheap, disposable launchers for devastating simultaneous salvos anticipated systems like the Soviet Katyusha of the Second World War. A steel pipe, a drum of poison, an electrical wire. 16 shillings per death. The official British assessment, deposited with the Imperial War Museum in September 1919, stated plainly that the enemy feared them more than any of the other chemical warfare methods of offense. A 27-year-old engineer, driven by grief after the Lusitania, improvised a weapon from oil drums on the Somme battlefield. Within 8 months, it evolved into an industrial-scale terror weapon that the German army explicitly feared above all others. That was British engineering. That was the First World War. And that was how a disposable pipe bomb terrorized the entire German army.